I have 6 o'clock. We'll get started. Call the steering committee to order. We have, I'll go ahead and call roll. Dwight Jewell here, Jerry Ford, Beverly Atwood, Gary Clarity, Bill Ferguson, Bubba Gregory, Landon Gully, Richard Harsh, David Nollner, Lonnie Taylor, Mayor Chambers. Okay, we do have 8. So we do have a quorum. We can conduct business. First thing we have tonight is to review the minutes from the June 7th meeting. They were sent out to you. Is there any additions, corrections, or deletions from the minutes? Mr. Harsh? Have a motion to approve by Mr. Harsh, second by Mr. Ford. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? The minutes from June 7th are approved. Next, we have items to be discussed, to be reviewed, personnel policy updates and the pay scale implementation and some cleanup measures. Mayor, you want to enlighten us on all of those, please, sir?
Yes, sir. In the packet, you'll see some language that came from the consultant firm that did the wage study. That's Burris Thompson and Associates, of how to implement the wage study into the personnel policy. And this is language they proposed that goes over how the steps and grades were created. That the market rate tries to be set about step 8. Talks about how jobs are assigned to it. Provides a payment or adjustment to the pay structure. It says it'll be reviewed periodically, typically every 1 to 3 years by Human Resources Coordinator and the Mayor, and be adjusted if necessary to ensure the county's pay practices remain competitive. And it goes through, lists some items that'll be considered if you're going through and looking at adjustment of the pay scale, pay structure. Says that it does, the Human Resources Coordinator will recommend. Give me just a moment. I need to speak to the sheriff about something. All right. Sorry about that. It says the Human Resources Coordinator will recommend an adjustment of the pay structure, and it has to be approved by the mayor and the county commission. I believe I had previously handed this out in about February, and there's no changes to it. Talks about where the new hires start. It does have a pay scale right now, a step of a phase-in step that you can either keep or do away with. It's basically if you have somebody, I would suggest if you're going to have somebody come in, if you want to keep that phase-in step, that if somebody comes in on their probationary period, they're on the phase-in step, and once they complete their probationary period, they go to step 1. Or if you don't worry about the phase-in step at all, you can eliminate that and just leave it step 1 through 15. And then it provides that the department head, if somebody's coming in that they feel needs to be above that step, that they have to submit written justification to the Human Resources Coordinator for consideration and final approval of the mayor. And that'd be a situation where if you have an employee coming in that has experience already in that field, then they can say, well, I don't think they need to be at phase-in step or step 1. Maybe they need to be step 3 or 4 based on the experience and everything they already have in that, working for other governments or something like that. So that gives some flexibility as to recognizing experience and education of an employee that's coming in. Pay adjustment, it provides that all regular full-time and part-time employees, it says employed before January 1st of the current calendar year, and providing that their performance evaluation is an acceptable range or higher, are eligible for a possible pay increase effective July 1st of each year. So that makes it concurrent with the budget process. It does have a section that addresses annual increases, and it says the Human Resources And the mayor calculate the recommended salary increase based on all employees' pay increasing the next step in their current salary grade. That is more likely going to be the executive assistant or budget and finance, which is currently Ms. Thomas. So it should actually be three people: the human resource coordinator, mayor, and then the budget and finance director. We'll calculate that based on the current increase of, I think they got 2.5%, but I think when they put it together, it was actually 2.35% is what the difference in the steps were, and that'll be presented to the county commission. Any employee that receives unsatisfactory job performance will not receive the step increase. And on this particular language, I would recommend inserting language that basically says this annual increase is subject to appropriation by the county commission. I know that was discussed during the budget process, and so I think that'd be the most appropriate section under this proposed language to insert that, to make sure that everyone understands that just because this is recommended doesn't mean, you know, the final decision maker is going to be county commission. It's going to be subject to appropriation.
Where are you talking about adding that in? And what
If you
wording?
look on your page, you should be on page 2. It says pay adjustments. And then there should be a subsection 2, the first bulleted paragraph. I would suggest inserting language in, which would effectively become the last sentence. Something along the lines of, give me a moment, annual increases are subject to appropriation by the county commission with the annual budget. Something like that, I think, would address some of the concerns that was brought up during the budget process, and then make it clear that any increases is subject to appropriation.
Should we take that 2.5% in parentheses just totally out of it and insert the language there based on all employee pay increasing to the next step, current salary grade based on available funding by the county commission, or as determined, where it says to present?
Yeah, if you don't want to keep the recommended, I think it was 2.35% increase between the steps is what Burris Thompson come up with. So if you went from, you had an employee who went from step 2 to step 3, but then they'd get a 2.35% increase just based on their evaluation and recommendation of the department head. Or you want to be that floating, or you want to leave it at 2.35%? Or
Well, my recollection was that there was a lot of question about that set percentage automatically being in there, and that we had said that that would be determined annually by the county commission. Am I remembering that incorrectly? Somebody help me out here. Because I know we had said that, you know, it might be that it needed to be 5% or 1% or 0%, depending on the funds that were available in the circumstances.
That is correct. From the very beginning, actually, as we talked about trying to adopt this format, we took out the possible, you know, the existence of what we were looking at percentage wise, but we used it as a format. And so now, as we start talking about the percentages, it's always flexible. It always, at the end of the day, evolves around the decisions made by the county commission as to what they felt like affordable wise we could do in any given year. So yes, it is built with flexibility, or it should be.
And I'm not trying to be argumentative. That was just my remembrances on it, that, you know, that we didn't want to be tied to an automatic amount, that would be determined. Yeah, the steps, they would go up the step, and how much that percentage would be determined each year. That was what I thought we were trying to accomplish. Now, how the wording needs to go, I know that what we looked at was based on that, and the reason it was based on that was because they'd used that as the average of the last 3 or 4 years, what inflation, cost of living had went up, cost of wages. But I feel like that probably next year, certainly 2.5% increase in the face of what we got going on right now may not be enough. And that was one thing that we had, said all along, that we would evaluate it annually, is to see what that amount would be. Mr. Ferguson?
I think we need to establish maybe a baseline target to start from in each year, whether it be 2.35 or whether it be 2.5, because we do have flexibility. At least we'd have a target that we'd like to get to, if at all possible, with the understanding we still have flexibility. Does that make sense? That we at least have a target amount?
Well, I can see the wisdom of having a target amount, absolutely, because what's the point of having it if you're not going to have something built into it? But, the determination of that, I know that we had more than one discussion that it would be determined annually, subject to funds. It doesn't do any good to raise somebody a step up if you're not raising their salary. I mean, there's no point in the whole process if you're not going to have something automatically built into it. And I think 2.5% is pretty minimal raise in my thinking, to be going up, on an annual basis. That barely will keep up with inflation over the last 5 years. I think we've far more than average 2.5% a year. Of course, we've done more than 2.5% a year if you go back for 5 years, I think, and look at it. But so, however, we need to phrase it. I think it would be good to have that amount in there, so that when they're preparing the budget, which we have to do very early on, they would have something to base it on. Then certainly before the end of the budget process, it could be adjusted up or adjusted down, kind of like we did this time with adding an additional COLA on top of what the step increases were. Was that kind of what you're thinking, Mayor, the way to handle it best? Is that what you were
Well, the
suggesting with the wording?
The 2.35% was just supposed to be an increase based on performance. Anything above that, the county commission was going to do a cost of living adjustment if you thought it should be something above that. That's what the initial thought was, and that's what this language is based on. So again, if the commission wants to change that, I will just point out, I think these discussions are probably better to be had at the personnel committee than the steering committee.
Wasn't trying to have a discussion as much as a remembrance of what did come out of personnel committee, or what was talked about there. Just trying to figure out where the best place and how to best put the wording in there. Like I say, I'm not opposed to 2.5. I'm not opposed to 2.35. It's just, I think we had said that we would have wording that made it subject to yearly appropriations or availability of funds, or how you want to phrase it, to get that point across and where you want to put it in there. I'm fine with it at the end, the way you suggested. I just didn't know whether it might be better put at that point where it's talking about what you're presenting to the county commission. I certainly don't think we have the need at this point to send this back to personnel committee. That's not what I was getting at. I just was wanting us to try to help clarify the language based on what we talked about previously. I'll hush. Mr. Ford.
My recollection was we talked about that percentage. And I was thinking it was 2.5, but we were going to go back and look at it every year to see if the funds were available and at that time, make a decision whether we was gonna be able to do it or not. I don't think it was, I was not led to believe it was just gonna happen every year. It was only gonna happen if we could see our way to pay for it.
Mayor, if you want to continue.
Next one, talking about a structure adjustment. I guess this is describing if all the rates need to be adjusted up to meet current market conditions, and that would be a structure adjustment. That wouldn't just be individual increases. That would adjust the entire step and grade schedule up. Create new pay grade steps or whatnot if that the market requires that adjustment to stay competitive. The next bullet point talks about top out lump sum. Says employees rate of pay or not to exceed the maximum for their job, and that be once the employee reaches step 16 in individual or additional increases other than space pay structure adjustments will be paid in the form of a lump sum bonus. So, performance evaluations, this is something I know has been brought up several times, but the employee increases would be tied to performance evaluations. So I believe the performance evaluations in this are supposed to take place towards the end of the year. So the department heads can get those evaluations done and then use those to structure their budget request going into the budget year. So they'll start putting that together in January, going into February, and then work with the mayor's office and executive assistant who does the budget and everything, start putting that together and see how their budgets are going to go. Pay increase recommendations. All eligible employees who received an acceptable rating or better will be recommended to receive a salary increase based on the approved salary increase budget. And that would be effective July 1st each year. Again, that's all goes back to that language. I suggest we put in there that it's subject to appropriation by the county commission. Subsection 5 under this, employees that are on approved medical personal leave of absence on July 1st will receive the approved salary increase provided that their performance evaluations in the acceptable range. If their performance evaluation was not complete at the end of the calendar year, completion of the performance evaluation and eligibility to salary increase will be postponed until their return to active employment. Then we get into some definitions. You have promotional increase. It says placement of an individual in a job which is in a pay grade that is higher than an individual's current pay grade will be considered a promotion. Temporary job reassignments for less than 6 months will not normally be considered a promotion, and all promotions must be approved by the human resources coordinator and the mayor. And you got increased amounts. At the time of the promotion, the individual salary is to be adjusted to reflect the increased demands and responsibility of the new position. Says normally the employee's pay will be adjusted to the pay step that represents a 5 to 8% increase or more if needed to move the employee's salary to the new job pay grade step 1. Salaries of other incumbents already in the new position and the promoted individual's credentials will be considered in determining the amount. Temporary assignments, reassignments, adjustments to pay rates of employees assigned temporarily, which it says for less than 6 consecutive months, to perform work of higher level jobs will be made at the discretion of management. So that would be the department head. Lateral job reassignments. So reassignment to one job, from one job to another in the same pay grade will be considered a lateral move. No immediate adjustment to pay will be made. Lateral moves that serve to broaden employee skills and knowledge and improve county efficiency and results will be encouraged. So next section is demotions or reassignments to lower pay grade. Demotions occur when employees return to transfer to a position in a lower pay grade. Employees may voluntarily ask to move to a job in a lower pay grade, perhaps through a job posting or a bidding process. whether or not a reduction in pay should occur in these situations present on the calling consideration of the following. And the first factor is, where will the employee's pay rate fall in the new lower pay grade step schedule? Says normally employees' pay rate will be reduced to be consistent with rates of pay of other incumbents in the new job who possess similar skills and tenure. And it says that this consideration is usually more important than number 2, 3, or 4, which are the next factors. And pay adjustments must be approved by the Human Resources Coordinator and Mayor. Second factor is, how long has the employee been in the former job or employed by the county overall? Third factor is, was the reassignment related to the employee's performance? And fourth is, was the reassignment related to reduction in force or organizational change? Though a reduction in pay may still be appropriate to maintain internal equity, even if the change is outside of the control of the employee, such circumstances may be considered. Reclassification of a position. A job may be reclassified if warranted by significant changes in job responsibilities. To request a reclassification, department heads have to submit a revised job description to the Human Resources Coordinator. The market rate of the job would be determined based on the comparison of the job to available salary survey data. The job was being reassigned to a different pay grade if indicated by the new market rate for the job. And reclassification of a job to a higher pay grade normally would be treated as a promotion, which must be approved by the Human Resources Coordinator and the Mayor. And that section K above would apply to reclassification of a job to a lower pay grade. The last section here is equity adjustments. It says adjustments to correct pay inconsistencies or inequitable situations related to pay may occasionally be necessary. Department heads may recommend equity adjustments of up to 8% of salary and must submit a written justification for the pay adjustment. And all such adjustments have to be approved by the Human Resources Coordinator and Mayor, and have to be submitted with the annual budget for approval by the County Commission. And that completes the submitted language by Burris Thompson Associates to basically put in how the pay step and grade scale will actually function.
Questions, Commissioners?
Yes, is this something that we want to move forward to the full body for consideration, maybe in a work session, or do we want to move this to Personnel Committee?
This is, have Personnel Committee not looked this over previously? What we were presented,
This language was not submitted until after Personnel Committee had completed that. And Burris Thompson sent this to us, I think somewhere near the end of January, beginning of February, and I submitted to, I don't know if it was the steering committee or budget committee, whichever one it was. But I submitted that language at that time, and then we got into the budget process and it got kind of moved down the schedule. But no, the Personnel Committee had not reviewed this.
It's the first time I've seen it tonight.
well, I certainly would feel it would be appropriate for it to go to personnel. Since there's not any actual dollar amounts tied to it, I don't think it would necessarily need to go to budget and finance at this point. I think personnel would be the one review. I certainly have no problem with the language other than trying to, under pay adjustments to and annual increases, adding in there somewhere, subject to available budgetary funding annually. However, that needs to be worded best. I think that's the only thing that we've really had talked about previously, that in any way is any different from what we're presented here. I don't see anything, out of line. Mr. Ferguson, you're chairman of personnel. Do you think you can call a meeting pretty quick?
Yep.
Mayor, if we do get the personnel policy and this all ready to go, does it have to pass by one reading or two readings of the commission?
Since the personnel policy was originally passed by ordinance, it'd have to pass 2 readings.
Okay. We were, I was hoping that we would be able to end this process before we had the transition to the new commissioners, simply because we are more familiar with what we've put together, talked about, and done. It would almost be like starting the process all over again, trying to, I think, to explain it thoroughly to the new people. Certainly, if we can get it done prior to the end of our terms, July and August, I think it would be beneficial to all concerned to be able to do that. So, Mr. Ferguson, if you could get with Amy maybe tomorrow and get a date schedule and send that out, then I think we'll add this into it. Mayor, you want to cover this cleanup language?
Mr. Chairman,
Yes. Yes, Mr.
if
Fair.
it's going to personnel, I'd like for them to look at promotional increases. It looked like it me would be the department head instead of the human resource and the mayor to determine whether somebody needs a promotion or not, because they don't know what's going on with them.
You're talking about under promotional increases,
First,
the amount, increase amount,
no,
item
it
2.
says just a promotion would be considered by the human resource and the mayor. I think that should be by the department head.
Well, I think the department head is the one that would be suggesting those, would they not?
Mr. Joel,
Yes.
I think it might need to have something to the effect of maybe the recommendation from the department head and then maybe a meeting with human resources and the mayor.
So what you're saying is it doesn't say who this is coming from. This could come from the employee. Mayor, are you following along on this? You following this reasoning?
Yes, sir. I see the language is not here, but I always assumed right how it works right now is any promotions are done at the recommendation of the department head. So I guess this was just add in approval by human resources and the mayor, but as far as where it begins, it all begins at the department head, but I can understand that language not being specifically included could create some questions.
Verbiage, just verbiage on it, just getting that in there to make it very clear that that's where it's coming from. Right, exactly.
I agree. I think it would be good just to clarify it there. Pretty simple thing. That's something y'all want to talk about and add in personnel committee. You got a note of that? Yeah. Okay. Mr. If you would try to get with Bill and your suggested verbiage there. Yeah. Certainly, anything between now and the personnel committee meeting is, take time to look this over. And if you see something you feel like needs to be tweaked, let the mayor or Mr. Ferguson know so that we can try to clarify the language. A lot of this is very technical, very, I hate to use that term, legalese, but it almost has that ring to it. And for many of us that are not used to that type of language, it might be a bit confusing. So anywhere that we can clarify the process so that there's no confusion about it later, I think it's worth doing. Okay. Anything else on that before we move on to these other cleanup notations?
Yes,
Yeah.
motion to move this document to Personnel Committee.
Sir? Have a motion to move this? Second. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Okay. Try to get that scheduled so we can have this for our business this month if possible, Ms. Ferguson. Please. Cleanup, Mayor, I guess that's that second sheet. Is that this one?
Yes, sir, and I'm sorry it doesn't have a heading. This is actually the inclement weather policy. The last severe weather event we had, I sat down with my staff to talk about how it would have worked under this, what we had passed through the Personnel Committee. And there was language that should have been included in what came through personnel. It was included, personnel was given two options with different language. How it specifically said the mayor and constitutional officers will determine when their offices closed was in option one. It was not specifically stated in option two. So this second paragraph you see that's in red font, that's just moving that language into this to clarify that the constitutional officers have to make the decisions for their offices. The mayor, I don't control their offices, they do. Now, all those decisions are made in coordination with them and the department heads, but we need to specifically have language in there that says they're the ones that make that call. And then also that they will have to provide or grant their full-time employees administrative leave. Either department heads or constitutional officers have to do that. That can't come directly from me. It has to come from them. So that is just to put that language that was in option one into this one, which was option two. It should have been included from the get-go, and when we reviewed it, we noticed it wasn't in there. And then there are two other proposed changes. If you look at section 4, there was talked about if the county facilities open and then is forced to close because of weather, is all employees who report to work will be paid. Well, it didn't say they'll be paid for time worked. It just said they'll be paid. So this to clarify, they'll be paid for time worked, and that in full-time employees who reported to work will be paid for time worked, and the remainder of their scheduled shift will be paid administrative leave. So if they report to work and they got an 8-hour shift and they work 4 hours, well, then they'll get paid 4 hours for the time they worked, and if it got sent home, then they'd get administrative leave for the other 4. And the last one is under section 5. This is just a restatement. It said employees who report to work and are later sent home because of weather problems will be paid for the hours worked. That was just making the language redundant, so recommended taking that out. If you want to leave it there and have it in there in 2 places, that's, I don't see really, there's not that big an issue. It just was a little bit redundant.
I think it's covered adequately with what you put in there in 3 particularly. It is a bit redundant. I think we actually had conversations about that being redundant, if I remember correctly. I think it is redundant. It could be stricken.
And that's really the only changes I've got from what the personnel committee passed. And as I said, just the last severe weather incident we had, we sat down and looked at it and say, okay, let's do a mock run. How will this have worked? And we just found some deficiencies in it. We wanted to get that cleared up.
One thing I know that we had some conversations about, if I'm remembering correctly, previously on this was the verbiage that had to do with days worked or hours worked or something to that effect, that some people were scheduled, particularly on vacation time. They were getting paid for 8 hours vacation when their normal work day was a 12-hour day. Did we take care of that verbiage so that we corrected that issue?
That was changed, I think, in another section of the policy. It wasn't specifically an inclement weather policy section.
Oh,
I think it was
I
in a different
understand that, but I'm
section.
just saying, we did get that. I know that was talked about in committee when we went over it, trying to change that verbiage so that the ones that were getting their vacation some of them that typically their work week is more than a 40-hour work week. Say they were work week's a 48-hour work week, that they were only getting paid for the 40 hours. And we were trying to change the verbiage to, I don't remember whether we were changing it to hours or days, but we were trying to change the verbiage so that people could get paid vacation time, what their normal pay was. You remember what I'm talking about?
You're talking about the EMS employees.
Well, I think it was primarily them, but I think it was some others possibly, maybe even in the sheriff's department or some of the other departments, it possibly. I think EMS is the one that raised the issue that we had, had questioned it quite a bit. I just want to make sure that we have that worked out in a satisfactory way with whatever we're presented with. I didn't know whether that needed to be looked at again by committee or whether we got that verbiage worked out in our final draft is, I guess, my question.
I do remember it being discussed. I don't remember exactly which section it is in here, but I do remember that being discussed at Personnel Committee. And as far as the days and hours, the committee had voted to change it and leave it. Well, a previous committee had voted to change it from hours to days, I think. I remember there was some discussion about that. and
There
that
was some
put in here.
discussion and I know we were trying to figure out how best to phrase it so that they
Mhm.
weren't penalized and it was obvious that they were getting paid what they would normally make in a work week. So if you could check on that too, just to make sure that verbiage, if there's still a question about it, maybe get that before the committee as well to make sure that we have that little issue
I
resolved.
believe the discussion was that it had hours in here and it was to change it or leave it where it is in the current policy as days, working days. I believe that's what the discussion is. And I believe that is, we did go through and change that from the specific hours to working days.
I think we had said typical work days
Yeah.
or something.
Something along those
scheduled work
lines,
days,
typical work
something.
day. It was
Yeah.
something like kind of language like that, I believe.
Okay. Just if you could, I think we need to just double check that before we get to a final approval of a draft on this. Anything else in
I
this
just-
a little bit
Just a little
here?
bit further on, I think what we did is we included a definition at the beginning of it of what constitutes a work day, and then we called that a typical working day or something. But I'll go back and look, but I'm almost 100% positive it is in here.
The chairman, the premise was, or the question that's been raised that we're trying to avoid, and it especially relates to EMS, and it may go beyond that department, is it employees that were wanting to take a vacation, however, it was costing them money to take the vacation because they were not receiving an average week's pay in the process of taking a vacation. That's where this came from. So whatever we need to do to, if we need to adjust it, fine. If it's okay as it is, that is something we probably need to look at in this next meeting. So.
I think it was several departments. I think EMS was the one that was the most dramatic because they don't typically work an 8-hour day. They're paid for 12-hour day, whatever. So when they went on vacation, they were only getting paid for 8 hours and wasn't getting paid the rest of their salary. So I think that's what we were trying to accomplish with that, was to make sure that not everyone was scheduled typically a 40-hour week, that they got paid if they took days off, even if it's like, administrative day, vacation days, even sick leave, what is their regularly scheduled amount of time that they're paid on. That's what we were trying to accomplish. Now, how the wording needed to be, I think that was what we were had asked to be worked out so that we could accomplish that. That's my recollection on it. Other than that, I don't remember there being anything when we went through it much that needed to be addressed or looked at. That's the main things that stick in the back of this old mind. Anybody see anything else with this or remember anything else that we need to try to look at? All right. I appreciate it. I think, Mayor, appreciate all the work that you've done on putting this together and the committee previous to this. I know we had many meetings that we were involved in trying to hash this out. And, I think it's really gonna be a big help to not just our human resources director and the mayor, but also to the employees, so they know what to expect and know that they're being treated fairly. So I really appreciate the fact that we're trying to get this done. I hope we can get it finished up in the next 2 months. All right, Mayor, was anything else on this? Any further questions on this one? If not, we're gonna move on. EMPG appropriation.
EMS/EMA Director Beatty has asked if the commission would consider using the $5,000 emergency management performance grant we receive as a addition to his salary or some kind of bonus. That amount would be $5,000. So I want to bring it forward to the committee. It would require a budget amendment. And I also have a question, since this is a grant, typically in grants, once a budget has been submitted for that grant, if you want to change it, and you have to get approval by the state, and this would be a change as the grant was submitted originally. It did not provide for any salary usage of it. It provided for administrative fee and equipment, but it didn't have anything for in the salary line. So I think that would have to be approved, not just by the county commission, but by the state as well. That's my initial thought on it. But wanted to bring that before on his request. If you want to send that to emergency services or budget and finance or for any further discussion on that. And I will follow up with the state and try to get a clarification on that. Like I said, every other grant contract we've had, if you want to change any of the budget line items, you have to get approval by whatever department that comes from. So my initial thought is that would have to be agreed upon by them as well.
So his request is to take the proceeds from this $5,000 grant that we're receiving. Now, who is that coming from? From Tennessee or?
I think that comes from Tennessee Emergency Management Agency, I believe.
So he is requesting we take the $5,000 grant and give it to himself as a budget, as a bonus. And he did not receive the AARP bonus. Is that his justification in thinking on it?
Well, I think this would be going forward. I don't think this is just a one-time thing, but I would have to get clarification for him on that. It could be his intent was just to use it as a, surrogate for that, if you want to call it.
Mr. Mayor, what was this
Ms.
grant?
Atwood?
I'm sorry, what was this grant originally given to them for?
I believe the last grant application he submitted for was to purchase some equipment.
So are they not in need of this equipment now? I mean, is this just like excess money or?
Well,
I'm
there's
just trying
a,
to get some clarification.
and I understand, and he wanted to be here tonight, but he had something that wouldn't allow him to be here, and that's why we thought if we could have further discussion in emergency services, if you wanted to send it there, or budget and finance, whichever one you want to do it. But I think our current grant is about to, the year is about to expire, and we'll have to apply for another one that I think becomes effective in August. I think those are the dates I'm thinking of. So if you're going to do it effective in August, it's actually going to be on a new grant, not the one we've already submitted for this current fiscal year.
Typically, we have several small grants from the state, like litter grant, things like this, that if you apply for them, you're automatically going to get the minimum amount of money, which I assume that this is. And sometimes they will award more, particularly if they get down. We've had in this type of grant where they had funds left over at the end of the year that weren't all used, and we've been able to qualify and get additional grant funding toward the end of the process. But typically, that's parked in equipment and I let them use it where they want to. Sometimes we move it around. But does that, I think, you know, we have several of these type grants that come along routinely every year, and this is one of them. Mr. Harsh,
Move to send this to emergency services to be further considered.
Wouldn't it be better sent to budget finance?
probably needs to go to both, just be honest with you. I mean, will it have to come as a budget amendment? Or will it just be a resolution to change where the funding will go? I guess that's what we still have to find out from the state, if they'll even let us do it.
Yeah,
that correct?
Director Beatty said he had talked to the state and they said it had to be a budget amendment. However, they didn't clarify a local budget amendment or a budget amendment to the grant budget. So that's what I want to get clarification on.
Mr. Clarity,
I think we'd be better off if they want to use it for pay scale or whatever you want to use it for, instead of giving it to him, give it to the employees out there that say they're not making enough money anyway, because he just got a big raise in this pay study. Instead of being greedy and wanting a $5,000 added to it, let the employees that does the work get it.
I would have to look in, I think this particular grant goes to the Emergency Management Agency, not Emergency Management Services. So it doesn't go to the ambulance service, it go to your emergency management. So like your disaster response, something like that. I think that's what this grant is. That's why it's Emergency Management Performance Grant.
I see we got two choices. Send it to Budget and Finance, send it to Emergency Services Committee, or both. Just,
Amend my motion to include also send it to Budget Finance Committee as well.
okay, restate your motion, please.
Send this to Emergency Services Committee and Budget and Finance Committee for further study and to see if it's even possible.
Recommendation to the,
Yeah, recommendations.
Mr. Taylor,
Second.
have a second by Mr. Taylor. Any further discussion on this?
Which one does it go to first?
Whichever one gets scheduled first. I mean, you're sending it to both. I mean, yeah, I mean, hopefully it would go to Emergency Services first, but,
Yeah, I'll try to get mine in and then
okay.
the budget finance has
Budget
their
finance
scheduled
already
meeting
set.
already anyway, so.
Yeah. I said, you know, if you could get it prior to that, that'd be good. But certainly try to get it right away. You know, I'll be perfectly frank, I have mixed emotions about it. I'm not necessarily opposed to it. Sometimes you get not because you ask not. So I can't fault him for asking. Okay. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? We'll send it to these two committees. Let's try to get them in and get this so we can get an answer on this. And Mayor, if you'll find out for sure that it's okay for us to do this, that would be great. Transfer of power. The mayor and myself have had some conversations about this. I'll let him explain his thinking on it. And I may jump in there with you, but
Okay. Well, I had talked to county attorney for another county and as well as Mr. Beller about doing some kind of training for incoming government officials, county commissioners, if there's a new mayor, that could be done at maybe the work session for the county commissioners. It would go over kind of generally the charter, how committees are structured, how they work, the positions of the officers for the committees, how the legislative process works, all those kind of things. Because I know CTAS has a training program, but you're going to get the, I guess, qualification on a lot of other things. Well, if you're Metro, look and see how your charter works. Because it comes through in the budget and several other things. So I think some kind of training that we do specifically for us to address some of those areas that the CTAS is not really going to get into because we work differently than, well, we work differently than every other county in the state, even the other 3 metros, we're all a little bit different. So that's something I discussed Mr. Beller, and he was willing to go ahead and put that together. So just wanted to bring it up to the commissioners. I think that'd probably be a help in going forward and maybe ease the transition over to the new commission.
Our thinking was to have this sometime in August after the election, of course, and prior to them being sworn in and taking office. I was gonna try to assist with the commission procedures and go over our rules and make sure they all had a copy of them and understood them, and also with them, what we would do, in our August meeting. Our August meeting will be early this year. I believe it's the 22nd, if I'm not mistaken. I believe the 1st is on a Monday, so that puts us the 22nd in August. So somewhere in that second, third week, we can do this. My thoughts is for our current commission to conduct business through August, at least through our August meeting. And at the end of our meeting, we would have a kind of a joint swearing in of all the new people in the newly elected commissioners. And basically, kind of, I guess you'd say, pass the gavel or gauntlet to them at that point in time. Technically, under state law, their term does not start until September 1st. However, they can be sworn in anytime after the election between then and September 1st. They can literally walk in once the ballots are certified. They can walk into Rita's office and be sworn in and become a commissioner, even though they're not seated. But that's the way we've typically done it in times past. It seems to work well. And you'd almost have, the August meeting can almost be like a joint meeting. They would be here in attendance to see what we just done. And at the very end of the meeting, it's one of the last items of business would swear me in. That's from everything I could find in state law, state election laws. Mayor, have you found anything contrary to that? I know we've had discussions, but didn't come up with anything, I don't think, really concrete on it. You think that would work?
Yeah, I believe that's what we did last time as well. There was, I think Chancellor Smith's the one that came in and did the swearing in and had all the elected officials here come and did it. So that'll just be carrying forward what we've all done already. And like you said, they can be sworn in, and then as soon as midnight hits on September 1st, they're the new county commissioners. You don't have to worry about swearing them in after that.
Their September meeting will be pretty hectic. I'm sure they're going to need to elect a new chairman. And certainly whoever the new chairman is, I will volunteer my time to try to help them with their committee selections. And one thing that we wanted to do was to go ahead, the survey, much like we did with which committees you wanted to survey, you know, or serve on, have that available for them in that August meeting so they could get that turned back in right away, so their new chairman could help put those committees together and have them ready to try to announce to them at their September meeting. I don't know. I think it would be good to, you know, go ahead and get that survey to them and have them, require them to have it turned in by their September meeting when they elect their chairman. So that chairman, whoever he or she is, has the opportunity to have those in their possession and get right on that. And that way, hopefully by their October meeting prior to it, they would have the committees decided. That just seems to be it doesn't have to work that way. Certainly if someone's got other suggestions or reasons why you don't think that's the way to handle it, I've given it quite a bit of thought and tried to go back and look at what we did before, and that seems to be the way we've always handled it. So, yes, that's where we're at. I know, we're gonna have several new commissioners. I think there's no doubt about that. And they deserve for us to try to help them at least get off to a good start. That's all I'm trying to do. I'm not trying to tell them what to do or how to do it. Just try to help them have a good start on getting started and answer a lot of their questions. We may or may not have a new mayor. We may or may not have a new sheriff. I mean, there's certainly some options this election that maybe we haven't had quite this many in recent times past. But I know myself and the mayor, and I will speak for him on this because of our conversations about this, want to try to help whoever will be in these respective positions to be able to hit the ground running and have the information that they need. And be that from the mayor's office all the way to the commission and some of these others. So that's what we're trying to accomplish with that. If you have thoughts on that, please get with us. DEMS training program.
Sir, there should be another handout that was on your desk when you came in. It has a resolution 2013-26-329. This was a program that had been put in place, like I said, in 2013 for the county to pay for training for paramedics. It's kind of lain dormant for many years, and in discussions with Director Beatty, other mayors, other EMS, and Mr. Randall Kirby, who's a former state EMS employee. We're looking to kind of rejuvenate this program and expand it from not just paramedics, but also EMTs and AMTs. We've been speaking with Vol State Community College. They actually have these programs in place, and they're willing to come and do an off-campus class here in Trousdale County to do these trainings. And we've also reached out to Smith and Macon counties if they want to participate in this, and we've gotten good interest from them as well. So this is just the first page, just to show you what that previous resolution was. The next page, if you flip over, you're going to see what looks to be contract language. It's memorandum of agreement. We did go ahead, and the only thing that's been amended to this is instead of having just paramedics, the AMTs and EMT language has been inserted to this. All other language stayed the same from the previous resolution. And Mr. Beller has reviewed this and thought it was appropriate as far as its form and function. Again, there's been no change as far as what the parameters of the programs are, other than extending it to paramedics, EMTs, and AMTs. And as we go forward, Mr. Kirby was able to get to me last week some figures from Vol State, the tuition cost, including tuition, lab fees, books, uniforms, insurance coverage. The total should be $2,928 per student. There is still the 3-year requirement in here that if we pay for their tuition and training, that they are employee for Hartsville-Trousdale County for 3 calendar years. And there is a provision in there that they could buy it out. If they go to another county, they could have to buy it out on a pro rata basis. So if they've got 3 years and they've done 1, and they just pay us buy out the remaining 2 years. And I've been told that that's kind of not unusual. But that's just kind of the basis of what we're looking at. We're still working on some of the more firm details, but Vol State was willing to come in and do it. And we're probably going to have classes here in Trousdale County. I'm not sure what the amount of students that they're looking to send from Macon and Smith are, but so we're still working on that. But everybody seems to be very interested in it. And the thought behind this was given that all EMS services, not just ours, are experiencing labor shortages, that we would kind of rejuvenate this and create our own workforce development pipeline for our 3 counties. And I'll try to answer any questions that I have the answer to at this time. Like I said, where there's still some details we're trying to firm up, but that's kind of the framework of it.
So this is in effect now. Did we have anyone when we first did this back in 2013 that took advantage of this?
My understanding is it was really written for one individual and they did not complete the program. So it's kind of lain dormant since then. I've been told we may have, as far as here in Travis County, as many as 3 to 5 interested in doing it. The question is now going to become, we don't really have any spaces available in our EMT and AMT positions. Those have been filled recently. So are we looking at, how many people are we looking at paying here? This initial class is just going to be EMTs only. And I don't think that we have any spaces for that. So again, as they go through this, some of this is going to be up to the director. I will say, if we're going to put this in place, we'll have to go through the county commission again and do another resolution to extend it to the AMTs and AMTs, because the previous resolution only did it for paramedics. So we will have to extend that.
But it would be an amendment to that original.
Yes, it's going to be just an amendment to the original. We're not recommending a wholesale rewrite, just extending it to EMTs and AMTs. And as we go forward, one of the things I'm going to suggest as far as the funding mechanism is to use some of the American Rescue funds, because it was intended for these purposes.
Mr. Ford?
What was the cost on that again?
It was $2,928 per student. And that is for the EMT.
Is that for the complete thing? Is that for the 3-year training?
No, this is just for the EMT classes. The EMT and AMT classes are typically just 1 semester at Vol State, and the paramedic training will be 1 complete year at Vol State. So if you're just doing the AMTs and EMTs, it'll be 1 semester, and that's the $2,928. For the paramedics, it would be more, but at this point, they're just doing the EMTs. They're not doing the paramedics at this point. I mean, that could be a consideration as we go forward. But as far as the classes here in Travis County, it can only be EMTs and AMTs. For paramedic training, they have to go to Vol State because there's equipment and everything they can't take offside the campus, and so they would have to go to Vol State for training.
Chairman, do you need that in the form of a motion to move that to the full body?
I don't know that it needs to go to committee. It's already on the books. It's just a matter of updating the language. I think certainly it could go on to the full body.
Yeah, I'll make a motion to that effect.
Okay, Mr. Ferguson makes the motion. Mr. Noller, your light's on.
Yeah, I was gonna say that if a person took the EMT, then he has to work a year before he go to paramedic school. He has to have a year of work. So if you couldn't do both, one right after the other one. I believe it has to have a year of work.
So what you're saying is you couldn't do both at one time. You'd have to do,
Yeah, he
Right.
could do the EMT, and then he has to work a whole year, and then he can start and become the paramedic, go through this paramedic part. I don't know how you would work, would it be still 3 years or 5 years or 6 or whatever, but I don't know how that would be, but
Mayor, do you think you can have the wording worked out on this for it to go to the full body?
What additional wording is it you're looking for?
Well, just the resolution written so that it's amending this resolution.
Yes, sir. It won't take too much. We'll just
Sure.
kind of amend some of the language from the previous
Right.
resolution and make sure, just state that it also applies to EMTs and AMTs.
Okay. We do have a motion to send this on to the full body. Is there a second to that motion? Mr. Ford makes second. Any further discussion on it? Seeing none, all in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Okay, we'll send that one on. We'll try to have that one on this month's business as well. Anything else? Mayor, did you have anything else?
No, sir.
Commissioners, anyone have